The little bookstore tucked at the corner of Lexington Avenue had always been Clara Bennett's refuge, not just because it was the only job she'd managed to hold on to, but because it was the last quiet place in a life that had become unbearably loud. At 26, Clara was no stranger to sleepless nights beside her mother's hospital bed, instant noodle dinners, and envelopes marked final notice. Her father had died when she was 15, and since then it had been just her, studying, working, surviving. Her love for literature had shrunk down to these few hours a day in a dusty bookstore where books smelled like memory and comfort, not dreams. That morning, the cold felt sharper. The early spring winds crept through the cracks in the window, clouding the glass with mist. Clara wrapped her fraying scarf around her neck and began organizing a tower of romance novels a careless customer had left scattered. Her hands were calloused, nails chipped, but her movements were careful, tender, even as if she were arranging stories, not paper. The doorbell chimed softly. The day's first customer, an elderly man, stooped under a too large coat and worn wool hat, shuffled in. Clara moved instantly from behind the register. "Looking for something, sir?" she asked with her warm, practiced smile. "Just sheltering from the wind," he replied, voice trembling. "Back's acted up today." Without hesitation, Clara guided him to a cushioned chair near the window, fetched a bottle of warm water, and gently removed his soaked shoes. She wrapped a wool scarf around his shoulders, placed a book in his hands like it was part of a sacred ritual. "Stay as long as you need," she said softly, returning to her post. She didn't know that behind a tall shelf of history books, a man had been watching everything. Nathaniel Carter, the media mogul known for hostile takeovers and an iron heart, stood silently among dusty volumes, something unreadable flickering in his amber eyes. He wasn't here for books. He had come to find a woman his assistant claimed might be the only one who fits. What he hadn't expected was to be moved. When Clara returned to the counter, Nathaniel approached. "Do you often help strangers like that?" His voice was low, calm. Clara blinked. She hadn't seen him enter. "I guess I didn't think about it." "Well, I did," Nathaniel replied. He studied her quietly. "I have a proposition, something unusual, but I believe only you can do it." She narrowed her eyes. "What exactly are you asking?" "Pretend to be my wife. 7 days, all expenses covered, no strings attached. Just a performance." Clara didn't answer right away. How could she? A wealthy stranger had just walked into her quiet world like a winter storm and asked her to pretend to be his wife for 7 days. She laughed, a shaky, confused sound that held no humor. "Are you filming some kind of reality show?" she asked, half joking, half hoping. "No," Nathaniel replied, pulling out a sleek business card, his name embossed in silver. "I'm serious. I need a wife. Temporarily. For an upcoming corporate merger. Certain legal frameworks, media optics, international investors, they expect a stable public image." "Why me?" Clara asked softly, her heart pounding in her chest. He studied her for a long beat before replying. "Because you didn't act. You knelt beside that old man when no one else did. You did the right thing, even when no one was watching. Then why not have a real girlfriend?" Something dark flickered across Nathaniel Carter's face, a wound that hadn't healed. Because real relationships are messy, they hurt, and then they end. The brutal honesty in his voice seemed to freeze the air between them. "How much?" she asked, surprised at herself. $50,000 for 7 days. The amount was absurd, more than 2 years of her salary. Enough to cover her mother's hospital bills, enough to start over, enough to dream impossible dreams. And what would I have to do? Attend events, dress appropriately, smile, pretend we've known each other for years, pretend to love me. The word love slipped out like a whisper, carrying a vulnerability Nathaniel tried to conceal. And after 7 days, we go back to our lives as if we never met. Clara glanced around the small book cafe, the tall shelves, The pink-covered romance novels, her dreams felt smaller than ever. She looked at Nathaniel. His eyes held secrets she would never be allowed to touch. "I need time to think." "You have until tomorrow morning. If you say yes, be at this address by 8. He placed another card beside the first. "If not, I'll take it as a no." Nathaniel turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Clara." She flinched. She hadn't told him her name. "It's on your name tag," he said with a faint smile. "Thank you for what you did today. People like you are rare." The door closed behind him, leaving only the trace of his cologne and 2 questions that would haunt Clara for the rest of the day. But what if it's real? And what if she said yes? That night, Clara fought a silent war between reason and need. Sitting on the single bed in her tiny one-room apartment, she held the 2 business cards in her trembling hands. $50,000. The number danced through her mind like an impossible promise. At exactly 7:15 the next morning, Clara stood in front of the ornate wrought iron gates guarding the Carter estate. The address on the card had led her to the most exclusive neighborhood in New York City, where every house looked like a palace and every garden a work of art. Her faded blue suitcase looked pitifully out of place amidst the gold trim and marble facades. She pressed the intercom button. "Claire Bennett," she whispered, her voice shaking. The gate opened with a soft mechanical hiss, revealing a cobblestone path lined with royal palms. The worn soles of her sneakers thudded quietly on the stone as she walked in, each step a reminder that she didn't belong here. The mansion loomed ahead like a sleeping giant. 3 stories of neoclassical architecture, gleaming white columns, tall golden-framed windows, and a circular fountain in the courtyard where lazy goldfish drifted in slow circles. "Miss Bennett?" Clara turned, startled. A middle-aged man in a dark tailored suit smiled at her politely. His hair was silver at the temples, perfectly combed, his posture upright, and he carried a silver tray in one hand. "I'm Clara. I wasn't sure." "Of course, ma'am. I'm Henry, the estate's butler. Mr. Carter's expecting you. May I take your luggage?" Before she could decline, he had already lifted the suitcase gently, as if it were royal treasure. Clara felt like an imposter, being guided onto the stage of a play she had no right to be part of. The interior took her breath away. Carrara marble floors reflected the light of crystal chandeliers hanging like frozen constellations. A sweeping staircase with mahogany railings led to the 2nd floor. Portraits lined the walls, stern faces that seemed to judge her unfamiliar presence. "Mr. Carter is waiting for you in the study," Henry said. He led her down a long, seemingly endless hallway. The Persian carpet muffled her steps until they were nearly silent. The air smelled of polished wood, fresh flowers, and something intangible, perhaps the scent of old money. They passed a sitting room filled with furniture worth more than her entire apartment, a library that stretched to the ceiling, a music room where a black grand piano sat quietly, waiting to be awakened. The door to the study was dark wood, carved with ancient, storytelling patterns. Henry knocked softly. "Come in." Nathaniel's voice was different, more authoritative, more distant. The study was his domain. A large mahogany desk dominated the space, 3 computer screens glowing with graphs and figures. Shelves stacked with books on law and economics lined the walls. He was typing on his laptop, reading glasses perched on his nose, giving him an air of command. He looked up as she entered, and for a split second, Clara saw genuine surprise. "You actually came." "I said I would." Nathaniel closed the laptop, removed his glasses, and stood. Even from across the room, Claire could feel the pull of him, like a quiet, dangerous kind of heat. "Henry, prepare coffee for 2, and call for Miss Armand immediately." "Yes, sir." When they were alone, silence settled between them like a heavy velvet curtain. Nathaniel walked around the desk and came closer, close enough for her to see the flecks of gold in his eyes. "I thought you'd change your mind." "I thought so too," she confessed before she could stop herself. "But $50,000 is a lot for someone living on 2 minimum wages." A faint smile touched his lips. Elusive, like a ghost. "Practical, I like that." "And you? Are you sure this will work?" Nathaniel hesitated. His hand slipped into his pocket as if seeking shelter. Because you don't want anything from me but money. That makes everything clean. The word clean carried a weight Clara didn't fully understand, but she felt it. There were scars in him, secrets guarded like classified documents. The door swung open, slicing through the moment. Enrique entered with a tray of coffee, followed by a woman who looked as though she had stepped out of the cover of a Paris fashion magazine. Platinum hair in a neat chignon, a pale pink Chanel suit. Louboutin heels clicking like a conductor's baton. Monsieur Nathaniel, bonjour. Her French accent was thick and unmistakable. This is the young woman? Celeste Armand circled Clara like a hawk. Her icy blue eyes scanned every detail, evaluating her like a block of uncut marble. Good bone structure, defined waist, hair with potential, but, mon Dieu, what is this outfit? Clara flushed, a plain cotton top and faded jeans. It's what I have, not anymore, Sherry. Nathaniel's expression remained neutral, but Clara caught a flicker of something in his eyes, something protective. Madame Armand is a protocol and etiquette expert. She'll be preparing you for the upcoming events. How many events? Clara asked. 3 main ones, a charity gala tonight, a business party tomorrow, and a family ball on Saturday. Each event sounded more intimidating than the last. And I have to pretend to love you? The question slipped out, more fragile than she intended. The room fell quiet. Madame Armand raised an eyebrow, clearly catching the shift. You'll have to act like you've been madly in love for 10 years, Nathaniel corrected, his voice too calm to be casual. As if you shared secrets, shared a bed, shared passionate nights, Madame Armand added with her typically French bluntness. Clara choked on her coffee. I'm sorry, what? You'll be his wife. People will observe every glance, every touch, every smile. If there's no chemistry, the whole illusion will collapse. Nathaniel stepped away from the desk, walking toward the window that overlooked a perfectly manicured garden. There doesn't have to be anything physical, just the illusion of intimacy. Remember, he said, not turning back, this is just a role. Don't let yourself get involved. The warning struck like a cold blade. Clara stared at his broad back, noticing the tension in his shoulders, the way his fists clenched unconsciously. And what about you? She asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Have you learned how to get involved with someone? Nathaniel turned slowly. Their eyes met. In that instant, all masks fell away. She saw the pain in him, the loneliness eating at him. A man who had built his walls so high he no longer remembered what it felt like outside them. Not yet, he said. Honest. And heartbreakingly so. And I don't intend to. Madame Armand blinked slowly, clearly sensing the silent current of tension flowing between them. Well then, we have a great deal to do, she declared. Clara, come with me. First a mineral salt bath, then a full facial treatment. After that, we'll choose a gown for tonight. What kind of gown? Clara asked. The kind that makes every man turn his head and every woman seethe with envy, Madame Armand replied without hesitation. As Clara was led out of the study, Nathaniel returned to the window, silently watching her figure move through the garden alongside Madame Armand. She still looked uncertain, still a little out of place in that world of marble and silk. But there was a quiet grace about her, a kind of natural elegance that no amount of money could ever buy. He had chosen well, perhaps even better than he expected. Training began immediately. Art history, Bourgogne wine etiquette, red carpet posture, how to shake hands with European diplomats. Celeste spared no mercy. Body language betrays you faster than words, she said, and you're not allowed to betray this role. Clara struggled. She mispronounced an Italian designer's name, wrinkled her nose at a daring gown. She even laughed at the wrong time while practicing the phrase, "Darling, you're incredible," in the mirror. But she also learned how to stand taller, how to smile just enough, not too warm, not too cold, how to meet someone's eyes even when anxiety twisted in her stomach. That afternoon, she tried on her first gala gown, ivory satin, open back, tasteful V neckline. Celeste adjusted the hem, nodded once. Nathaniel appeared in the doorway. He stood still. For the first time, his eyes weren't cold. There was a flicker of something like a string pulled taut inside him. But he masked it quickly. "Tonight, the charity gala at the Met. Press will be there." Clara nodded silently. As Nathaniel turned to leave, Celeste glanced at Clara through the mirror and said, almost to herself, "That's the first time I've seen him look at someone for more than 2 seconds." At exactly 8:00 p.m., Henrique knocked gently on the door. "Ma'am, Mr. Carter is waiting in the main hall." Clara's heart pounded. It was time for the performance to begin. The curved staircase had never seemed so long. Each step echoed like a countdown. At the top of the stairs, she saw Nathaniel standing below, adjusting his tie, eyes fixed on his phone as if there were 1,000 things he'd rather be doing. The black tuxedo fit him like it had been sculpted for his frame. His hair was sleek, and his Italian leather shoes gleamed like mirrors. Then he looked up and froze. The phone slipped from his hand and hit the marble floor with a sharp, cold clatter. His lips parted. His amber gaze swept over her from head to toe, as if trying to make sense of a vision that couldn't possibly be real. "God," he whispered, barely audible. Clara descended the final steps, feeling his eyes on her like a tangible touch. "Is the plan still intact?" she asked softly. Nathaniel didn't answer right away. His eyes had darkened, pupils dilated, locked on the curve of her red lips. "You look beautiful," he finally said, voice rough. The word beautiful wasn't just a compliment. It was reverence, and maybe even a touch of disarmed awe. "Let's go," he said, extending his hand. "The car is waiting." Camera flashes burst like fireworks as they stepped out of the black Bentley in front of the Metropolitan Museum. Clara took Nathaniel's arm, silk gloves brushing against his tailored sleeve. Her heart thundered in her chest, but her footsteps kept the practiced rhythm. Her ivory satin gown clung to her like shimmering mist. Soft waves of chestnut hair fell over one shoulder. Wine-colored lips, hesitant eyes that didn't flinch. She wasn't the bookstore girl tonight, at least not outwardly. "Just smile slightly and look at me like I'm your entire world," Nathaniel whispered as they stepped onto the red carpet. "And how will you look at me?" she asked, glancing up. He paused, like, "You make me forget everything else." Inside the hall, an opulent space with vaulted ceilings and white orchids cascading like waterfalls. Clara felt out of place, but Nathaniel's gaze, always returning to her from across the room, anchored her. And then Elena entered. Elena Marteau's ice blonde in a black silk gown that clung like a second skin, with a smile as soft as velvet and sharp as razors. She wasn't alone. Her father accompanied her, the co-founder of a rival media empire. "Nathaniel," Elena purred, each syllable dipped in honey and spite. "You didn't mention a wife?" "Clara," he said, tightening his grip on her hand. "This is Elena." "Wife?" Elena turned to Clara, eyes scanning her like a scanner for flaws. "What a surprise." "We had a quiet ceremony," Clara replied with a calm smile. "He doesn't like noise." "How curious. When we were together, things were never quiet." Elena laughed, a sound with no mirth, only memory. Clara felt Nathaniel's hand tighten. She didn't know their full history, but she recognized the look in his eyes. Wounds that hadn't healed. "Maybe," Clara said gently, "he's finally learning peace." Elena's face went pale beneath her flawless makeup. "You have no idea who you're talking to." "Oh, I know exactly who I'm talking to," Clara said, placing a hand gently on Nathaniel's arm, her gaze never leaving Elena. "The woman who belongs to my husband's past." Nathaniel looked at her, eyes filled with admiration and gratitude. No one had ever stood up for him like that. No one had ever claimed him so openly, so clearly of their own will. "It's nice seeing you again, Elena," he said firmly, "but now I'd like to dance with my wife." Without waiting for a response, Nathaniel led Clara onto the dance floor. The orchestra had just shifted to a soft Viennese waltz. They melted into the swirl of aristocratic couples, as if they had danced together all their lives. "You're perfect," he whispered, as he pulled her closer. "She hurt you?" Clara replied, her eyes locked on his. "I saw it in your eyes." His hand rested on her waist, burning through the silk. Their bodies moved in sync like a single breath. "Why are you defending me?" he asked, his gaze searching hers. "Because..." Clara couldn't speak. The space between them was too small. His scent, his breath, his eyes, everything overwhelmed her. "Because you're my husband. Even if it's pretend, right now it's real." Nathaniel paused right there in the middle of the dance floor, the other couples spinning around them like water around a stone. "Clara." He murmured her name like a prayer. "You're making this too hard." "Too hard?" "Too hard to remember this is all just an act." There was nothing staged about the tension in her voice. She knew it. He knew it. Something had shifted, permanently. "Nathaniel," she whispered, voice trembling. "I know," he replied, gently guiding her back into the rhythm, though his eyes never left hers. "I know what I'm feeling. And I know. It's dangerous." "Why?" "Because in 6 days, you'll leave. And I'll go back to being the cold man I was before." "And what if I don't leave?" she asked, before she could stop herself. Nathaniel faltered, just for a second, then recovered. But something in his eyes had changed. "Don't say things like that," he whispered, voice low and rough. "Not when you look like this. Not when every man in this room wants to take you from me." "No one can," she said, steady and sure. "For these 6 days, I'm yours." The music ended, but they didn't move, still in each other's arms, frozen, as if the world had vanished, leaving only two people, two locked gazes, two hearts beating in unison. There was no more acting, no more script. Everything was real, and they both knew nothing would ever be the same again. The Carter Estate's garden shimmered under the moonlight, turning each leaf into liquid silver, each flower petal into glowing silk. Clara had slipped away from the party, away from the curious stares, the hushed whispers, the unspoken undercurrents. She needed to breathe, to steady herself, but thinking was a luxury when her heart beat out of rhythm. She sat at the edge of the fountain, where goldfish swam in lazy circles, oblivious to the emotional chaos above. The gentle splash of water sounded like it was whispering old secrets. The scent of night jasmine lingered like a ghostly embrace. She slipped off her heels, letting her bare feet rest on the cool, damp grass. Just for a moment, she allowed herself not to be Clara Carter, just Clara Bennett, a girl full of sincerity and impossible dreams. "Why are you crying?" That voice, deep, warm, more breath than sound, came from the shadows. Clara startled and lifted her hand to her face. Her cheeks were wet, though she hadn't realized when the tears had fallen. Nathaniel stepped out from beneath the trees, his jacket gone, tie hanging loose around his neck, sleeves rolled up to the elbows, a few strands of hair falling out of place like he had been running. "I'm not crying," she whispered, unconvincingly. He stopped a few steps away, close enough to see the shimmering tears on her lashes, but far enough to leave space, as if afraid he might hurt her more. "Don't call me Clara, not when it's just us," she said softly, trying to keep her voice steady. "Clara is a character. I'm just me." Something shifted in his expression. Softer, more vulnerable, a crack in the mask he always wore. "Then why are you crying, you?" The name left unsaid, but spoken in the gentlest caress. She closed her eyes, seeking courage in the dark. "Because I wish all of this was real." The confession dropped like a heavy raindrop on still water, and her heart clenched as it echoed between them. Nathaniel didn't move. When she opened her eyes, he was closer. Close enough now that one touch would close the space between them. "What?" he asked, though his voice already knew the answer. "All of it," she whispered, looking up at him. "I wish you really saw me as your wife. I wish that waltz had been real. I wish the way you looked at me was because you felt something, not because you paid me to pretend." The air thickened, heavy, charged like the sky before a storm. Nathaniel raked a hand through his hair, ruining its perfect style. "You don't understand," he began, but she cut him off. "I understand perfectly," she said, rising to her feet, voice no longer trembling. "I'm just a prop, a supporting role in your revenge script against your ex." "Stop," he said sharply. But she didn't. Her eyes now burned, not with tears, but with strength. "You think this is easy for me?" she said, her voice tight. "You think I don't feel anything when people look at me like some doll you hired to decorate your loneliness?" Nathaniel closed the distance completely. Now she could feel his breath, his body heat, and his eyes. "You think this is easy for me," he said, voice cracking, raw. "You think I can stand there while people treat you like a trophy? When that man called you irresistible, I wanted to punch him. You think that was acting?" She stared, stunned. "From the moment you came down those stairs, I forgot it was fake." He lifted his hand, gently touching her cheek, as though afraid she'd vanish if he held her too tightly. "When Elena spoke to you like that, all I wanted was to shield you, as if you really were mine." Her heart squeezed, her breath stuttered. He whispered, "You've wrecked me." She choked out, "And what if I'm not wrecking you? What if I'm rebuilding you?" Their eyes met, and this time nothing between them was pretend. "Nathaniel, kiss me," she whispered, "not like a man kissing a hired actress, like you." He froze for one breath, then slowly leaned in, his hand slipping behind her neck. "If I kiss you now, there's no going back. I know. After this, nothing will be pretend. I know." He inhaled deeply, like a man about to leap off a cliff. And then he kissed her. At first, it was soft, like touching something sacred. But as she sighed, as her hands clutched his shirt, the kiss turned into something hungry, desperate, a thirst finally quenched, years of loneliness shattered in one heartbeat. They kissed like there was no tomorrow, as if the world had fallen away, leaving only breath, lips, and a truth too big for words. When they finally pulled apart, they were breathless, foreheads resting together, eyes closed. "God," Nathaniel whispered, shaking, "what have you done to me?" Clara smiled, voice trembling but radiant. "The same thing you've done to me." And in that moonlit garden, amid jasmine, water, and a gaze that never lied, two guarded hearts opened completely for the first time and forever. The morning light of New York filtered through the sheer white curtains, gently waking Clara. She still lay in the guest room, lavish like a storybook, yet somehow colder than ever. Her lips still tingled from the night before. That kiss, too real to be pretend. She smiled faintly, heart still racing. Maybe, just maybe, something true had begun. But the morning light didn't come with promises. It came with distance. When Nathaniel walked in, he was the same man, pressed shirt, loosened tie, but his eyes were miles away. "Good morning," Clara greeted softly. "Clara," he interrupted, setting a cup of coffee on the table, "about last night. It was a mistake." Her heart clenched. "What?" "We crossed a line. I shouldn't have let it happen. This is a contract, nothing more." She stared at him. "You're calling it a mistake?" "Don't misunderstand. I just can't let emotions get involved. There's too much at stake if things get messy." Clara nodded, mechanically. Inside, something cracked. She said nothing more, just silence. Deep and aching. That afternoon, as she curled up with a book in the library, Elena appeared, without knocking, without warning. "Clara." Her voice was soft as silk, sharp as glass. "I just wanted a moment." From one woman to another. Clara closed her book, trying to stay composed. "Elena, if you're here to..." "Not to threaten," Elena smiled. "I just thought you should know. Nathaniel was engaged to me. 5 years. I'm the only woman he's ever truly loved." Clara held her gaze unblinking. And you think, he's using me to forget you? Elena tilted her head, victorious. Isn't he? Who are you, really? A nobody bookstore clerk. Do you honestly believe a man like Nathaniel would choose someone like you? Clara stood. Get out, now. But the words Elena left behind had rooted. When Clara shut the door, her heart cracked again. Not because of Elena, but because Nathaniel had let silence do the talking. Grand Central Station at night had none of its daytime grandeur. The bustling crowds had vanished, replaced by echoing announcements and tired yellow lights. Clara sat on a cold wooden bench, small suitcase by her feet. Her hands clutched an old wool scarf, holding on to the last piece of familiarity. 3 hours had passed. 3 hours of thinking, reasoning, convincing herself that leaving was right. But logic couldn't soothe a heart in pieces. Her hand trembled as she moved toward the ticket counter. Everything inside her felt shattered, not because of Elena, but because Nathaniel had let her walk away without a word. Clara. She turned. Nathaniel Carter was running through the empty terminal, coat flapping, tie undone. His face was pale, exhausted, and terrified. He stopped in front of her, breathing hard. You can't leave. She stood slowly. The contract was only for 7 days. I'm just finishing what I was paid to do. There is no contract anymore, he said. It ended the moment I realized I love you. Clara froze. What did you say? Nathaniel stepped closer. No waltz in his eyes now. I didn't come here out of pity or duty. I came because if I let you leave, I lose the only thing that's made me feel human. What about Elena? She asked, voice trembling. He's the past. You're the only real thing in a life full of performances. Clara looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't see a powerful CEO. She saw a man learning to love. With fear, but also with courage. Why me? She whispered. Because you don't want anything from me, except me. As the loudspeakers called out departing trains and wheels rattled on the tracks, Clara stepped closer, looking up at him. I haven't bought the ticket yet. He exhaled, half a laugh, half a prayer. Thank God. Nathaniel didn't take Clara back to Carter Tower that night. Instead, they stopped at a small riverside house in Westchester, a place seemingly forgotten by time, quiet and unpretentious. This was my mother's house, he said as he opened the door. I haven't been here in years, but tonight I don't want to go back to glass walls and cold ceilings. Clara stepped in, breathing in the scent of old wood and dried flowers. The fireplace bore a long-forgotten crack, and the worn rug seemed stitched with memories. She took off her coat and sat in the armchair by the window, where the rustling trees whispered in the wind. I'm scared, she admitted, eyes fixed on her hands. So am I, Nathaniel said, sitting across from her, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard. I don't know how to love the right way, but I want to learn, if you'll let me. In the days that followed, they slowed down. They made breakfast together, walked in light rain, read quietly side by side. No contracts, no roles to play. One afternoon, as Clara brewed coffee in the aging kitchen, Nathaniel wrapped his arms around her from behind. I called my lawyer, he murmured near her ear. I'm updating my will. Clara paused. I don't want anything from you. I know. But you're the only one who's ever loved me, not for my money, my name, or what I could give. She turned to face him. His eyes weren't cold anymore. They were warm, like a fire lit in early winter. That night, they dined by candlelight, with wildflowers from the yard placed in an old mason jar. Nathaniel held her hand across the table, saying little, just watching and smiling, as if he'd rediscovered something he thought he'd lost forever. Do you think love can grow in just 7 days? She asked softly. No, he whispered, but with you, all it took was one look to begin everything. Clara never thought she'd walk back into glittering ballrooms, under blinding lights and scrutinizing gazes of the elite. But this time, she wasn't walking in with a contract tucked in her purse or rehearsed lines in her mind. This time, she walked in as herself, The charity gala hosted by Carter Media was held in a historic Manhattan hotel. Clara wore a simple black dress, no sequins, no extravagance, but she radiated quiet strength. Nathaniel stood beside her, fingers gently wrapped around hers under the lights. "I won't leave your side tonight," he murmured. She smiled. "I don't need you to protect me, but thank you for standing with me." Then Elena appeared. The same platinum blonde bun, a fiery red gown, and eyes sharp as blades. She glided over, champagne in hand, as if the spotlight had been waiting for her. "Clara," Elena purred, smooth as velvet. "So we meet again. I hear this time you're not just the contract wife." Clara didn't flinch. "This time, I'm here as myself." "Elena," Nathaniel cut in, his voice low but firm. "Let it go." Elena gave a tight smile, eyes flicking between them. "I just wonder, who do you think you are, thinking you can keep a man like him?" Clara stepped forward, gaze unwavering. "I don't need to keep him. He chose to stay." The entire room fell silent. "He has everything, money, power, fame," Clara continued. "I have nothing to offer in return, and I don't want anything from him except him." Elena froze. Words lost their edge. Nathaniel turned to Clara, his hand tightening around hers. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" she asked softly. "For standing there and being the only one who never had to pretend." As the gala neared its close, guests began gathering near the main stage, where the band played soft ballads. Nathaniel gently squeezed Clara's hand. She looked at him, brow furrowed. He looked nervous. "What is it?" she whispered. He simply smiled. "Just wait." The music ended, the chandeliers dimmed, leaving a warm spotlight over the stage. Nathaniel stepped up. The room hushed. He took the microphone, no script, no notes. "I used to believe," he began, "that someone like me wasn't made for something as fragile as love." Murmurs rose in the crowd. Clara stood still, heart racing. "For years," Nathaniel continued, "I lived by numbers, contracts, strategy. I didn't trust emotions because emotions meant risk, and I never took risks. Until I met one person." He turned to the crowd, toward Clara. "She doesn't come from my world. She never asked for fame, money, or power. She looked at me, not the businessman, not the CEO, but the man." Clara covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "Clara Bennett," Nathaniel said louder, and then stepped off the stage, walking straight toward her. In front of a stunned ballroom, he dropped to one knee. "I used to believe I was incapable of love, that my heart was built for numbers, not for beating. But then you walked into my life, without asking for anything, and for the first time, I wanted to give everything." He pulled out a small blue velvet box. Inside was a simple, elegant ring with a star-like sparkle. "No more contracts, no more deals. Just this. Will you marry me?" The air held its breath. Clara looked at him, the man who once was cold, alone, now kneeling before her like a boy learning what love feels like. She nodded, tears falling freely. "Yes, I will." Thunderous applause erupted. White petals fell from above. The ballroom bloomed with joy. Nathaniel stood, pulling Clara into his arms, holding her tight. "You did something no one else ever could. You made me believe in tomorrow. And you made me believe that true love needs no conditions," she replied, eyes shining. That night, they stood on the hotel balcony, watching the glowing city stretch out before them. "Tomorrow," Nathaniel whispered, resting his forehead against hers, "we're going to be the happiest couple in the world." A few months later, in a small, intimate wedding held in the sunflower garden behind the estate, Clara walked toward Nathaniel in a simple lace dress, holding a bouquet of wildflowers she had chosen herself. There were no reporters, no elites, no contracts to sign. Only vows, exchanged glances, and a love that needed no proof. Nathaniel, the man who once believed his heart was a fortress no one could breach, had let her in. No knocking, no key, just honesty. Clara, the girl who once believed she didn't deserve a happy ending, was now living in the most beautiful pages of a story she had written herself, with kindness, with love, with courage. And as they kissed, surrounded by those who truly mattered, in the glow of golden light and blooming flowers, no one remembered that their love had once begun as a 7-day performance. Because one truth had always remained: real love never needed lines to be real. It just needed two hearts brave enough to speak without words.